Hi, this is Maria Mandarino, and I am here today with Melissa Rueschhoff, who is a founding partner of Holon Law Partners, LLP, and they offer a collaborative approach to helping clients. It's a cloud-based firm, and they work globally. So she works around the world with people. Melissa's specific area is she works with women entrepreneurs. I'm going to have her fill in the gaps here because she'll be able to do that better than me. And they also have an intellectual property arm, sports entertainment law, and cannabis law. So I met Melissa a few weeks ago at a Chamber of Commerce event that she was speaking at. And I was there, I thought, under my acupuncture hat, because that was what I was there to really cultivate, that practice. And I was listening to Melissa's talk, and I was wondering if she led with an Enneagram 8. And at some points I heard a 3, but they were soft echoes, and I kept hearing the 8, and I'm like, put it away, Maria, because you're really here to be an acupuncturist today. And I'm like, oh, but is she an 8? And then as I was thinking that, she blurted out, so there's this thing called the Enneagram, and I'm the challenger, which is the 8. So with that as an introduction, Melissa, I'm going to have you tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll start there.
Absolutely. Well, good morning. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, I love how things serendipitously happen and you meet people along the way on your journey that you connect with, and that circumstances like that brought us together.
Yeah.
So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, we just founded a law firm back in July. I've been an attorney for 25 years now, which is dating myself. But we live here in Phoenix, Arizona, married. My husband's in the military, and we have 2 kids that are in middle and high school. Gosh, I grew up in Texas, and then with the United States military have moved all over. We've moved 12 times. And like I said, are now situated here in Arizona. That has been our home for the past almost 2 years.
Nice. All righty. So, tell us a little bit about how you came to the Enneagram and how you came to discover that you were an 8.
Absolutely. So interestingly, in that journey of moving 12 times with the military, I've gotten licensed in many different jurisdictions. And one of those jurisdictions was Hawaii. And so I was initially at the Attorney General's office, and then I transitioned over to the state legislature. And in both respects, I was working on eradicating. I'm very ambitiously saying eradicating child sex trafficking. But at the very least, we needed to figure out who were the buyers, who were the predators, and see how we could help hold them accountable. What I realized is that we needed better laws in Hawaii. And so when I went over to the state legislature with the Women's Caucus and then with the Judiciary Chair, I was drafting those new trafficking laws. And interestingly, in that very small space at the legislature, the chief of staff, a woman by the name of Arwen, said, there are going to be 11 of us working in a really tight space over the course of a legislative session, which is usually 4 to 5 months. I think it's best if we understand each other. And so she, very early on, had us take Myers-Briggs, Strength Finders, and the Enneagram. And I had not, to that point, heard of the Enneagram.
Yeah.
And this was in 2019. So I took the test, and I think what I found most fascinating was the history, that it has been around for hundreds of years, that it has a Christian basis, which I appreciated, and that different from all the other personality or analytical tests of us, this one doesn't change from the time you're 21 on. It doesn't change. Whereas, for example, the Myers-Briggs, I very early on was an extreme extrovert. But during COVID, during the time of the pandemic and the lockdown, I really tapped in more to my introverted side. And so to retake the Myers-Briggs, I was more moderate, more in the middle. Whereas every single time I've taken the Enneagram, and it's now been 6 times, I'm always the same number.
Yeah.
The other thing I liked about it is that it is what intrinsically motivates you,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty powerful because it's
Yeah.
not based on circumstances,
Right.
based so early in life. And I learned all of that just for the first time being asked to take this slew of tests, which included the Enneagram. I got
Mm-hmm.
some information on it. And then very ironically, my mother gave me a book for Christmas about the Enneagram. And I said, did you know that I just took this as one of many tests that we took before
Wow.
we started session? So I read it once, asked my husband and kids to take the test.
Well,
Of course, they are still at that point
they're
in
still
time.
forming. Yeah.
Yeah, they were elementary school. So theirs, and they've taken it twice, theirs has changed. My husband's has never changed, mine has never changed. And so it gave me a lot of insight
Yeah.
why I think the way I do, act the way I do, the decisions I've made,
Yeah.
and then also where I go when I'm at my best and where I go when I'm at my worst.
Mm-hmm.
And then from a relational standpoint, what that looks like for my partner, and then how can we both understand each other by
Right.
kind of dissecting it.
Right. Right. Awesome. Awesome. So Enneagram 8s are known for having a large energy, taking an all or nothing approach to life or certain things in life. And of the Enneagram 8s that I know, especially the ones that are female, they have a tougher time with that. I think more so when they didn't understand their Enneagram. But the ones that I talk to still have a tough time with it. So where do you come in with that?
So it's interesting. I've heard that phrase all or nothing.
Uh-huh.
Can you help me understand a little bit more? Because even though I read that book 5 years ago, I still do not ever profess to know more than what I just told you about the Enneagram.
Well, I think 8s are like they're gonna give it their all, which can to other types look like too much. And I think the nothing piece of it can be, and this would be a low 8. They'll just, that's it, I'm out of here. They'll go to the 5 and they'll quit. They'll just quit.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes. I've always said if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it right. And I'm going to do it to its fullest extent. So
Yep.
that what you said makes sense.
Yep.
Which is why I'm very intentional about the things I say yes to. Because I don't want to take on something, whether it's a board position, whether it's a new case, a new client, and even to, as we just spoke, to the new firm, unless I am all in, unless I'm willing to commit 100%.
Right.
And it's not that I will then say no and walk away from anything else or give up, I think, as you had said. It's more that early on I assess myself and I assess my capacity and my passion, because I really only want to take on things I'm passionate about, because it's a good use of my time. And then it's, when I say good use of my time, then I'm willing and able to do it no matter what, because I believe in it.
Yeah. 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 Okay. I hear a little bit of high level of the 5 in that too, with the time, the good use of the time. So were you as intentional about things before the Enneagram? Did the Enneagram allow you to be more intentional, or is that just who you are?
It's a great question. I don't know that I defined it or identified it as intentionality before I took it.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I think that has evolved over the past probably 5 years. Partly understanding the Enneagram, partly having some downtime during the pandemic, and partly really looking very intentionally at my schedule and saying, I want to know that when I'm saying yes to something, it matters.
Yeah.
Which is, I keep coming back to why we started the firm, but truly there are a million ways that we can spend our day. And when we choose to do it with partners, whether it be professional or personal, when we choose to block off time, in my opinion, it has to be for something that makes us better versions of ourselves or helps somebody else. And so I don't know that it was learning about the Enneagram that made me that way. I think I was always that way. I think I understood it better after.
Yeah. Yeah. Did it make it easier to like work with that energy then, or?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so, because, I've always said, I know I want to do something, and I've said this since I was little. I know I want to do something big and bold and impactful in this world. I want to really make a difference.
That's totally 8. Now, how old were you when you started saying things like that?
Oh my gosh. Well, and I think you probably remember this from the talk. I grew up, when I say sheltered, it wasn't as if it was a huge,
Mhm.
very wealthy family or high
Mhm.
socioeconomic area, but my parents very much protected
Right.
me. And so I
Yeah.
didn't know that there were a lot of atrocities and tragedies
Mhm. Yeah.
and poverty in the world.
Mhm.
And so I think the first time I ever saw somebody that didn't grow up the way I grew up
Mhm.
was,
Mm.
sorry, you can probably delete that off. That was Siri thinking I was talking to her.
Oh, okay.
Was when I was in elementary school and
Uh,
we were visiting family up in a Midwest state.
uh-huh.
And I'd heard about people that had lived differently. And I remember praying, take some of their
Mhm.
pain away and put it onto me. I wanted to change it. I wanted to change the world and I didn't know what that looked like.
Mm.
And so that was, I think I was 6 years old around that time,
Wow.
but I didn't
Wow.
know, of course, I just would pray about it. And so
Right.
then fast forward when I was in college and actually saw face to face
Right.
homelessness, um, prostitution,
Right.
and still didn't understand it,
Mhm.
but very much had this, that's that's different, that's
Mhm.
wrong, that's
Mhm.
I just had such a heart for them.
Mhm.
But very quickly after I had that feeling of sadness for them, I
Mhm.
very much then went to, when you say a five, I very much
Mhm.
then went to the headspace of I need to
Yeah.
change this, I need to
Yeah.
fix this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I don't know that I could identify at 6 or even at 17 when I was in college what my
Right.
purpose was.
Right. Right.
But I have since understood it to be that
Yeah.
thing that you're so passionate about that you want to
Yeah.
do regardless, or
Yeah.
the thing that makes you so mad you want to change it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That resonated with
That's
me
the
when
eight.
I,
Yeah.
is it really?
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's that anger that makes them move.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Propels them. Yeah.
Yes.
So a couple of things, going from when you were 60 to 17, I wonder, and I mean, there's no answer to this, but I wonder how many types have that kind of an extreme, because to me, that's an extreme intense response as a 6-year-old, right? Put it on me. I'm strong enough. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how I would translate that. So I wonder if eights are more pronounced or that it's more evident as they're developing. I have to ask other eights that.
That's a great question. I don't know. And
Yeah.
no one's asked me these questions until you. I'm learning. I truly am learning from you as you ask me
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah. We're always, I mean, even me, we're always still learning. The questions never end with the Enneagram. It's the best part of it.
Right.
Um, all right. So has it been a struggle for you as a woman having what most people consider a large, intense energy?
Hmm. I I don't think it has been for
Hmm.
me
Hmm.
because it's all I know.
Right.
But I have had people say um, that intensity or that drive or that desire
Hmm.
or my, whether it's a good or bad ability to be very direct,
Hmm.
um, is sometimes they don't know what to do with that.
To do with
And
it.
I've heard
Hmm.
some people say they love it because
Yeah.
there's no guesswork.
Yep.
And I've heard other people say they appreciate it, but then they don't. It's almost I don't want to say threatening, but maybe a little intimidating.
Hmm. Yeah, that's usually the word we hear. Yep. Yep. And that's to me, that's the beauty of the Enneagram as well, because that's really on them. And if they don't know their type, which is the majority of people that are, walking around in the safe way, right? So it makes it harder when they don't know. And
Right.
especially when you've done your work and you understand your intentionality and it's intense. We need 1/9 of the whole, because that's how I see the Enneagram types, right? The 9 are the faces of God, right? So you put all 9 together and you have divinity. Um, but 1/9 of that is intensity. And I'm of the belief that we need conscious intensity. So I'm grateful when the eights bring that, and when people don't understand the Enneagram, they're running around like, "Oh my God, like that's just too much." Or did you listen to that? No, just like everybody go back to their corners and understand where you're coming from and why you're perceiving it that way.
Well, and I do, to that point, I do think I've gotten a lot better about being cognizant of the fact that not everybody
Yes.
thinks and responds the way I do.
Yeah.
So I have very much evolved into, even though I will think, or I might feel, then think, then respond, and I brain dump. So you take then 8 with an extrovert.
Right. Right.
I'm very aware of the fact that not everybody is like that. And so I will consciously pause sometimes, or consciously not say what I'm thinking sometimes, and wait, which has served me well. And I think sometimes it's like knowing your audience, right? When you're talking to somebody, it could be a client, it could be a coworker, it could be a family, it could be an entire audience, but it's knowing who you're talking to.
Yeah.
So they aren't going to hear you unless you can be, they have to be able to receive what you're saying.
Yes.
If you're too over the top, or if you're too all or nothing, or if you're too intense, they're only going to feel that energy, and they're not going to listen to what you have to say, even if it comes from the best of intentions.
Exactly.
So I have over the course of my life evolved into being more conscious of that, which I think is received better, instead of just saying, this is who I am. I'm just going to continue to be me.
Yep. Yep. Well said. Well said. And I hope my 8s out there, some of the ones that I've worked with that struggle with that, I really hope you listen to that.
Reed, do you mind if we take a 1 minute break?
Sure. Nope.
My husband just got home.
Okay.
I don't know if he.
Okay, so we are back. So I wanted to continue on that thread of being of the 8 nature of having, like, they have energy. So they're prone to, some people see it as excessive intensity, whatever word we put on it. But because of having access to that energy and being like okay with stepping in and doing and acting, have you ever been prone to burnout? Because of the 9 types, 8 is the most prone. So does that?
That's a great question. Yes, but I think I do a better job now than I did when I was younger of building into my calendar things to prevent them.
Nice.
So I guess I would answer that yes. And there are times, last week's a great example. I had 6 nights back to back of events where I was either speaking, or I was in formal attire, or I was hosting something. And so come Saturday morning, I said, I'm just going to stay in my pajamas, and I never watch TV. I'm going to sit and watch a football game. And so that's what kind of coming back out of that burnout can look like.
Yeah.
But I think overall, kind of evening out, I do a better job of building into my calendar yoga classes, running or walking. I try to do meditation at least 3 times a week. I've continually tried and struggle with going to bed early, because I'm a night owl and have always been. But those things I'm more cognizant about, and really try to, again, to be intentional about, so that I don't end up with that burnout. And I knew looking at the 6 days back to back to back was going to be busy, and potentially I was going to have exactly what you would define as burnout. But I had built in that on Saturday we have nothing until later.
Did learning the Enneagram help you get to that point where you could build things in, or did you just do that on your own?
I don't think it did. I think it helped me understand myself better, so that I know I needed those things.
Okay.
But I've always kind of made space for that. I think maybe if anything, it helped validate what I had been trying to do for really probably 15 years, because again, I just learned about it 5 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
But it gave me almost permission to not just say, this is something I would like to go get a massage. I would like to go to yoga. I would like to fill in the blank. But it was, this is a good thing as well, so that I don't end up with that burnout.
Yeah. Nice. So the things that you mentioned, the yoga, the running, body-based things, right? So the 8's a body-based type, right? Out of the 3, the head types, the heart types, and the body types, the 8 falls into the body. So, so I'm assuming that's kind of an innate thing that happens to you, that you just want to do something body-based
It's a good
to.
question. Well, when I first started practicing, I was a special victims prosecutor.
Mm,
And people would ask me all the time, how do you handle that type of work? Because it was domestic violence cases,
yeah,
rape cases, and child crimes.
yeah.
And I would say, I get home and I go for a run. And so I clear my head and I
Mm,
pray. And then I very much silo or compartmentalize.
mm-hmm.
But I think I've always gravitated toward that physical thing as an outlet.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's really only been in the past. Well, when I would train for half marathons, I would counter it with yoga, but it wasn't the relaxing yoga, it was hot yoga.
Right.
90
Yeah.
minutes, heat the room.
Type
So it was
8 kind of
really,
yoga.
I love it. I absolutely love it. But it's not your relaxing,
Right,
soft music and you're
right.
just stretching and you might fall asleep yoga. I
Yeah,
mean, your heart
yeah.
is pounding.
Right. Yep.
But it really was probably within the past same time frame, maybe 6 years, that I started doing those more those things that kind of bring your heart rate down. And so I think, yes, I've gravitated toward body-based type
Yeah,
things,
yeah,
but also I would say spiritual. So
yeah.
prayer,
Uh-huh.
meditation, walking, clearing my head,
Mhm,
those type things, and along with the yoga, massage, running,
mhm,
those,
mhm,
yes.
mhm,
I fully realize when I look at the four things in my life, spiritual, mental, emotional, physical,
mhm,
that I'm much better at the mental and the physical.
mhm,
And
mhm.
then I try to work on the spiritual, and then the emotional, it really depends.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That sounds about right when you look at the lines with the 8. You guys have easier access to the heart energy though through the 2 line, right? So the 8 has the line to 2 in security, and in stress they go to the 5. Now I counter that with when I work with people. I always say once we know the Enneagram, yeah, we can go to a certain place in stress unless we're informed. And then we have a choice. We can go to the high side of the 5, or we can go to the low side of the 5, and the same with the 2. But the inclination is to go to the higher side of the 2 for an 8, because that's just where they go when they're secure. So that's easier for them. But when it comes to the stress type, the Enneagram, I believe, gives us a choice in that number.
Interesting. What do you
So
say, high side and low side? What does
So
that
the
mean?
low side of 5 is the shutdown side. It's
Mhm.
avarice is the lower expression of 5, where they'll just kind of keep everything to themselves. Usually it's information. They'll just hoard information. They'll shut down. They'll shut you out. And it's really because they're tapped out and they need to decompress. And it comes across as being kind of rude, abrupt, and standoffish. But when you know that that's your low side, and this was my own experience with when I was sitting with my spiritual director and working the first year working with the Enneagram, and she had highlighted that I had gotten upset with somebody, and she said, well, you took your marbles and you went home. And I saw a whole history of my life where that was my response, and it was because I was tapped out, and it's just like whoop, gone. That's it. So that's the lower expression of 5, but the higher expression of 5 is being able to observe and hold it all, being able to go within into a more introverted space, and just hold the good with the bad and not call it good or bad. And it's good. The high side is called omniscience, right? So yeah, but I think we have a choice of whatever our stress line is. So for the 8, it's the 5. Once we know our Enneagram, we have another line to work, another piece of the line to work with. So yeah.
Another choice, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And I kind of hear that with you with changing the style of yoga, doing the meditation, working on more of the spirituality. It's like something in you is pulling you to the high side of your stress line, which is when you're not consciously setting out to do it. Because in my case, it became a project because it was brought to my attention. But when you just start to do that, that's the beauty of the dance, you know. So I do have a
Kids did that
question.
to me.
Kids did that to you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think realizing that sometimes they just want to be heard.
Yeah.
Whereas, I don't know if it's being an 8, but I assume so. I was very quick to take a scenario, form a judgment, and issue a response or a reaction or a consequence if need be. And I, as they, because now they're teenagers, I've learned to kind of sit with what they're telling me and listen to it, and not be so reactive.
Yeah. That's the higher 5. That's what you're doing there, because it's a stressful situation, right? Because you want to do it another way. So it's still the stress line, but you're going to the higher side of that line. So that's pretty cool.
Well, thanks. Sometimes I still want to fix it. Let me
And
just
that's
tell you
okay.
how to do this different.
You're a mom. That's okay. I do have a question about the night owl. What does the night do for you?
Well, so all through law school, I would stay up until about 2 a.m. In my first class, when we got to choose them, started at 10. And that was even early for me. I shouldn't say obviously, but I would say for obvious reasons, when I had kids that shifted, because children pretty much rise and sit with the sun. And then obviously they're getting up throughout the night when they're little bitty. And so that changed a little bit when I had kids, but I feel like I'm more productive at night. I like to go to bed knowing everything is done and there's a plan for the next day. And so I can't ever think of a time I went to bed with dishes in the sink or with, I will walk through the house, make sure the doors are locked, the pillows on the couch are fluffed, the kids are all tucked in, the lights are all off, and I go to sleep with that peace. But usually once all of that is done, then it's pretty late. But I also value having time at night to do whatever, to read. In fact, I'm in the middle of Brene Brown's book about vulnerability.
Oh, wow.
And that paired with this conversation is really, really insightful for me. But I don't know, I feel like I'm just more productive at night. Now, I will say the flip side is if I will go to bed at a decent time and get up early, I can be just as productive in the morning. It just hasn't been my nature.
I was just wondering about that because I love nighttime because no one else is up doing things like what's happening right now. I don't know if you can hear the leaf blower outside my door.
I can't.
Our gardeners are here right now. But it's that tranquil, quiet, it's the reset. And I was wondering if because with 8, it could be an excess type of energy, which I was not hearing from you. I was hearing more, it's that tranquil, what the 5 needs to hit the reset button so that tomorrow dawns easier.
Both. I think it's not excess energy just that I need to expend as much as it is I don't like going to bed with additional things to do. So I do need to get and I joke that I'm a functional ADD because I don't sit and do one thing completely. I will start to do some of it and then I'll take a break and I'll do other. But at the end of the day, all of them have been done. I don't usually go to bed with things left undone. Or if I do, there's a list for the next day.
So I'm glad you mentioned the functional ADD. So we've chatted before about wings. And you mentioned that you're a 7 wing, right? So I kind of hear that in that functional ADD, that it's the 8 leaning toward that 7. So
and that was really interesting too. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in 8, the challenger, and you can either lean toward the 9, which is a peacemaker, or the 7, which is an enthusiast. Is that right?
Yep.
And when I saw how, it wasn't even close. The peacemaker was here and the enthusiast was up here. I went, of course, because I'll have this idea. This really sucks, but don't worry, we can fix it together.
Totally 7.
I was like, that makes perfect sense. Or I'll hear something and very quickly think, that's a problem, but we can fix this. I very much go to how can we resolve this? And it's okay because there's, when you look at optimist or realist or pessimist, I'm very much an optimist. I feel like I don't think I've ever encountered something that I don't think we can make better or fix or improve and not because I need there to always be progress, but just because I don't know, I see things from a perspective of this is great. We can work on this together. There's a problem. We can solve it. And I don't know. I think that's what gives me, I would say hopeful is probably a really good description of me. Is I really haven't had many times in my life where I feel hopeless. And I can't even think of one. I mean, I always think, yeah, this might be really bad right now, but I know there's a light at the end, or I know there's something better coming tomorrow.
Yeah.
So
Nice. Okay, so you mentioned the challenger, and it really depends on whose test we take or whose system we start out learning the Enneagram in. So there's different names we give to each type. So I'm going to read you a few of them. One of them, the last one, really to me isn't a descriptor of the type, but sometimes it's used. To me, it speaks more to the shadow of the 8. So I'm just going to preface this with that. So the last one speaks more to the shadow. So we have the protector, the leader, the adversary, the challenger, which you've mentioned, and the destroyer, which is the shadow. So how do you weigh in about with the other ones other than the challenger?
I don't fully understand and haven't heard the destroyer, but I recognize and relate to all the other ones. It's also been really interesting for me to realize, because I didn't know anything about the Enneagram 25 years ago when I went to law school.
Yeah.
But to realize, absolutely. I mean, I don't enjoy conflict, but I recognize when you walk into a courtroom, that's essentially what you're doing. It's an adversarial scenario. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be mean, but it's adversarial by nature.
By nature.
And so you're stepping into that role, and everybody understands it. And I have no problem with that. I don't like conflict with or adversarial circumstances with people I care about. I struggle with that. But I absolutely feel like an advocate and feel like I'm very justice oriented. I've always been. My entire life, I've always been justice oriented. This is right, this is wrong. And especially when it comes to people that I care about. I'm very protective, which you said protector, and I'm thinking, yes. Advocate, yes. I feel like, and which is probably then fully, it makes sense that then I would be a special victims prosecutor.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Not only am I justice oriented and advocate, but I love and still do love being a voice for others.
Right.
And so whether it's a child, whether it's a woman, whether it's a special victim, whether it's somebody in distress, but especially if they don't have a voice, to be able to. I was
just going to say that's the 8. They'll be there for the underdog. They will absolutely step in and protect the person who can't or has no one else to protect them. It's like a magnet for an 8 to step in and do that. And it's really when you see that happening, and I've had the privilege of having some 8s in my life where I've actually seen that happen, and it's really beautiful. So I thank you for bringing that to the world, because I say that all the time to the 8s that I work with. I'm like, we need healthy 8s, and the ones that I work with are in their own progress, and they're angsting over their 8, and they look at me and it's like, they'd rather be any type but the one that they're in that moment, because it's hard when they're in the work. But we really do need those healthy 8s who can step in and speak for and protect those who cannot and need that person to be there. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And I don't even know if I would identify it as hard. I feel privileged to be able to represent those people. My mom would say to me, how do you do that kind of work? Or how do you have that voice? And I said, well, I look at it this way. You can open a newspaper and see something horrible happening in the world and say, I can't believe that's happening. I can open that same newspaper and say, I can fix that, or I can be part of the solution, or I can help them see a better way, or maybe that hope that I feel like I have, I can help give to somebody else.
So I want to just point out to everybody viewing right now that what you just saw is the purest example of an 8 going to a 2, to the giver. And that is a healthy, when an 8 is in a healthy state, they have that abundance of the heart energy to give. And so it's not just the protection of the person with no voice and advocating for the person with no, it's then the next step is we travel across that circle to the 2 and give from a place of empowerment and strength, and only the strength that an 8 can bring. So thank you for demonstrating that. Because we don't think of that people that have a superficial understanding, especially of the Enneagram. We don't think of the 8 having that other side to them. So, so thank you for demonstrating that again. That was nicely said. Okay. So you mentioned not understanding the destroyer, and I would fully expect you to say that because you're one of the highest 8s I've met. So the destroyer is the capacity in the 8 when they're in the shadow to be vengeful, angry, and just, take the sword and cut off the head and walk away. So I don't like that descriptor of the 8, but I've heard it used. It's more of an older, quite a few years ago word that would be used. And I think it's what helps perpetuate that negative view of the 8, which really bothers me. Bothers me for any 8. I trained with a woman who was an 8. We were in the program together. She quit the program because of that kind of judgment coming at her. Because she wasn't that way, but her intensity, people jumped to conclusions. And I think she would have been a brilliant spiritual director, and she quit the program because she just couldn't stand that, viewpoint or that definition being thrown around. So
destroyer somebody that would as an 8, would they be destroying an adversary or the people in their lives, or
whoever they perceive as an adversary? So in some ways that can be a good thing if we're really talking about a dark adversary, but if someone's in the low state of being, it could be a family member who isn't that person, but the 8 in their lower state is seeing them that way. And or a boss with an employee, or it's that person who leads with 8 who will never come through the door to do the work. It's that person, because those people don't, most people in there are really, really the lowest side of any of the types are not the ones that are showing up to investigate the Enneagram. So but when 8s are feared, and a lot of times they are, most of the time it's because somebody's met one of those 8s and they jump to conclusions about the type. So I have a question. If you are engaged in a discussion with someone, and let's say it's an intense discussion, but to you it seems like an average discussion, and then they stop engaging, how does that affect you?
I'm laughing because as soon as you asked that, I was thinking of this scenario. So my mother and my father-in-law they have completely opposite political views. And I won't tell you which is which, but we do not talk politics when they are both around for their own sake.
Right.
But each of them will talk to me about it, and I will listen because I have strong opinions about issues, but not political.
Right.
So my father-in-law and I were in this heated debate about certain political issues and in the world of politics. We were in this heated debate. My husband and my mother-in-law couldn't take it. They literally left the room to go play dominoes because we were just debating and we were not upset with each other.
Right.
We're not, there was no ill will.
Yep.
And it was very much just a healthy, well, what do you think about this? Why do you think does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
But to them, it was too emotionally charged. And to my father-in-law and to me, we were just bantering back and forth. And it reminded me, my dad's been gone 12 years, but it reminded me growing up with my dad, we would get in the biggest arguments. And 5 minutes later, we'd say, where do we want to go to dinner? And my mother could not wrap her head around that. And she would just say, you guys were just at each other's throats about, whatever issue, maybe my curfew or my bedtime or, was growing up.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, but we resolved it. We moved on. So it just, when you said that, I don't know why, for some reason, it made me think of my father and my father-in-law.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to do that with people that can then easily move on. I have to be very cognizant because I do have some very special people in my life that I can't have that back and forth with
Mm-hmm.
and then easily
Mm-hmm.
move on. There's
Yeah.
too much angst for them
Yeah. Right.
or too much
Yeah.
emotional, I don't say trauma, but
Mm-hmm.
essentially it manifests too much.
Yeah.
And so it's harder to come out of that with some
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Okay. Does it upset you though if somebody just can't have the conversation anymore and they don't tell you that, they just stop talking? Is that hard for you?
Um, I think it would maybe be harder for me if I had something I wanted to say and I couldn't say it.
Ah, okay. That
But if
makes sense.
they don't necessarily want to engage or
Uh-huh.
respond,
Yeah.
then that's okay. As long as I've
Yeah.
been able to say what I was thinking
Yeah.
or how I was feeling
Uh-huh.
and get my point across,
Okay.
then I've learned, and it's probably, being that my partner's not an 8, my
Uh-huh.
kids think are 8s,
Uh-huh.
but realizing that I have to respect where they are or where
Yeah.
they're coming from.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. Um, how do you feel about weakness, whether it be in yourself or in others?
And you mean any kind of weakness?
Any
So,
kind. Yep. Your perception of weakness. Because I think weakness means different things to different people.
right. That's why I
Yeah.
thought I should clarify.
Yeah.
So in myself, um, I am learning to tap into the beauty of vulnerability, but that is
Mhm.
very new for me.
Mm.
That is not something innate in me.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's something, to be honest, that I think I've struggled with 20, we've been married 20 years.
Mm. Mm.
Um, is like, that is not something I've ever seen as a good thing. To me,
Mm.
vulnerability has always kind of been a negative for
Yeah.
me personally.
Yep. Mhm.
And I do see the beauty of it because you can't get to that deeper emotional level if
Mhm.
you don't have that.
Yep.
But again, it's not organic for me.
Right.
With other people, I think I see it one of two ways. If it's somebody I can help, if
Mhm.
it's somebody I can lift out of that weakness, or I can
Mhm.
help them be stronger, or I can be strong for them,
Mhm.
then I see it as a let me help you.
Mhm.
I want to make this better for you.
Mhm.
If it's somebody that I see a weakness and they either don't want to come out of it
Mhm.
or they don't want the help out of it, I have a really
Mhm.
hard time with that.
Yeah. Yep. That's commonly what we hear about 8s. And again, it's that 2. If you can help them, you can go to the 2, and that's comfortable and natural. Yeah, but if they don't want to, it usually is frustrating and can really anger some 8s. So
Yeah. It's where, I'm thinking of a scenario. It's where some I could see would just shut down. And I think
yeah.
I do that, but I do it very siloed. So I
Mhm.
wouldn't dismiss that person out of my life.
Uh-huh.
In that scenario where they're refusing to either allow me to help them or help
Mhm.
themselves,
Yeah.
then I don't want to talk about it again. I
Yeah.
don't want to go back and
Mhm.
because if they have the tools to come out of it, or I say come out of it, the tools to be stronger,
Mhm.
and they choose not to, I think I just don't comprehend it very well.
Mm. Okay, that makes sense. Because it is pretty foreign to an 8 because the 8s just step in. So when somebody else can't step in or won't step in, or won't let you help them, it is foreign to them. So yeah. All right. How do you feel about leadership positions? Do others often put you in those positions, or do you find yourself just taking those positions? Any of those?
Both, both. Yes, I'm just thinking all the boards I'm on the executive board. So I'm not just on the board, the
You're at
board
the
of
top of the board.
yes. So some of them, obviously, I was asked to be on the board,
Right.
and then asked to be in that executive position.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I prefer between leading or following. I prefer to lead. Now, I actually really enjoy learning from other people. So it
Mhm.
doesn't mean that I need to lead and know everything,
Uh-huh.
but I like to see the forest for the trees.
Uh-huh.
And so I
Uh-huh.
think something that might frustrate me is being in a team where there's no progress,
Mm.
or we aren't moving forward, or we aren't. I would say probably the thing that is probably the most difficult for me is to have a meeting for the sake of a meeting. we're going to have a meeting, there should be a purpose to it. And then there
Right.
should be a do out from it. And then we come back, we should be following up with how did that go?
Uh-huh.
So I think that's where I naturally take on those leadership qualities, because I want to see that that forward progress, and or just simply that we are productive. I think I have a hard time with a lack of productivity, which is why I go back to, I don't watch TV very often, and I don't. Most of the things I do in my day are something that would better me. And I'm not saying TV can't better you, but for the most part, that's more of just a decompression, which if I'm going to do that, then I want to do yoga or go walking or meditate.
Yeah. Okay. So in the instance of being around incompetent leadership, give me a scenario. What happens?
Oh, I might go directly to that incompetent leadership and very kindly and gently suggest a different way of doing it, or propose an idea that either that leader or I can put forth to the group so that we can have less incompetency, more competency. But I don't sit well with it. And I would say at the extreme of that, if I've tried that avenue, which is going directly to the leadership and trying to help boost your competency, and trying it different ways. Here's what I'm happy to do this for you, not necessarily lead, but step
Here's
into
the two.
Let me help you. Help me help you. But it's also being able to, and I remember when I was picking juries, I loved this, approaching it from both a cerebral and an emotional perspective. Because if you can explain to somebody why it matters, most people, if they know the why, most people will understand it and get behind it. And everybody responds different. Some people respond better to the emotional reason or the motivating reason, and others are very much factual based, and that's okay. But it's giving them the data they need to either lead more effectively or give me the ability to do that for them. And then I think at the end of the day, if we've gone through all of that and it's still not changing, either they're not allowing or giving space for others to lead that could do it better, or help them lead. And at the end of the day, I have to really be intentional again about my calendar, my time. And I say, I can't dedicate my time to this because it's ineffective and inefficient.
Perfect example of going to the higher side of the 5, because it's stressful. You don't like it, right? But you just, if you're going to be in the 5, you just took the diplomatic approach to how to use your energy better.
Well, that was I would say those are learned experiences. I don't know that I
would didn't start out that way.
Right.
Yep. Okay. So you mentioned vulnerability. How do you experience vulnerability? And because you're a body type, I'm going to ask if it has a physicality to it. Do you notice vulnerability first in the physical? Like, where do you notice vulnerability somatically?
I would say probably here in my gut.
Yeah. Okay.
So below the heart, above the abdomen.
Okay.
And it is uncomfortable for me. It's not something that it's not uncomfortable if somebody else is being vulnerable with me.
Right.
It actually opens my heart more, and it makes me, way more, I will stop whatever is going on to listen to that person and try to help them.
Yep.
But it is not intuitive for me to go there. It very much, if there's stress that I want to go to, and probably it made me a good trial lawyer most of my career, because I would feel compassionate for the victims I'm working with, or people that want, if it's somebody starting a business and they want to change the world, I want to help them through that. And I very much then go cerebrally to how can we accomplish this? How can we, if it's women entrepreneurs, how can we do strategic planning? How can we make this the best it can be? If it's a child victim, how can we help them know it wasn't their fault? Help them through the process, put away the person that has done this to them. But it becomes very cerebral for me. And so that kind of, I guess, visceral would be the word, that
Yeah.
gut reaction,
Yeah.
very much then, because it's a form of stress, I would guess,
Mm-hmm.
goes to what can I do with this?
Right. Yeah.
And so I have been trying, and I think kids have been a huge manifestation of this attempt
Mm-hmm.
to allow myself to sit in it. And sometimes it's intentional breathing.
Yeah.
Okay, they're talking through
Yeah.
something that I want to fix, I want to solve, I want
Yeah.
to make better
Mm-hmm.
for them or for their scenario, and I have to kind of breathe through it and ask questions instead of try to solve their problem for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
That is not my nature as much as
Yeah.
it would be to just fix it or solve it.
Mm-hmm. One of the expressions that one of the phrases, I guess, that we use with the Enneagram is the thing that is as scary to us or almost as scary to us as dying. And most eights would put vulnerability in that bucket. Does the visceral piece of it feel that scary?
Um, I've heard people say they'd rather, of the two, they would rather die than have to publicly speak. I don't feel that way at all.
Yeah.
But when I hear people say that, I think it can be. I think for me, it's probably a work in progress
Mm.
because I think historically, I have been in times where I'm vulnerable and I very quickly get out of it because it's uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I go to that headspace and that resolution space.
Yeah.
And if it has to do with somebody else that I can help, then I become very action oriented instead of sitting in that emotion.
Yep.
And so I think for me, it's still very much a work in progress, which is why, even though I had listened to her podcast, I went back to her first book to
Yeah.
start reading all of Brene Brown's books on
Yeah.
vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I loved her
Yeah.
phrase that that you should share your story with people that have earned the right to hear it. And so then the question becomes, who is it that has earned the right to hear it that you can really be vulnerable with?
Yeah.
And then it's really, for me, it's doing the work of what does that vulnerability look like and then being able to share.
Yeah.
And I know my best friend since fourth grade, my sister, and my husband would be those three people.
Right.
But I don't know if in the course of my life, I've stopped to say, I was in a vulnerable space there. And then I went to my headspace. But I'm working through that. I think I'm going through that process
Yeah.
really now
Yeah.
of looking back and saying, okay, that makes sense. I was vulnerable. And I think I kind of couched it as a coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
I became productive. And I looked to next steps. And most people said, oh, that's amazing that you were able to do that. But I think there is value to realizing that you were vulnerable and sitting in that vulnerability for a time period, even if it's really, really uncomfortable.
Yep. Yep. That's hanging out at that 5 line, because it is stressful. The vulnerability feels stressful. So I'm going to go into that 5 space. But the other thing that we do in the 5 space is we discern. So it's exactly what you're just innately doing. So, so if you're an 8 listening to this and you're struggling with vulnerability, taking your awareness to the high side of 5 is key. And being aware of the 3 body centers. How much of my energy is in my body? How much of my energy is in my head? How much of it can we bring to the heart? How much is allowable? It's kind of like a budget divided into 3 sections. So, and we try to, there's always one that we're going to be, struggle more with. And that's the one that we, work on more. So you're doing that. So,
Work in progress.
Yeah, we all are. What brings you joy?
Lots of things. I mean, little things like seeing a blue sky. We've lived in places, through my husband's military career where it's gray, and it's gray,
All the
most
time.
of the year.
Yeah.
And so little thing, I really appreciate those things, like blue sky. I love being out in the sun. And now I'm learning to be better about sunblock and rash guards. But I love the ocean. We surf and we stand up paddle. We snorkel and scuba dive and outrigger canoe, and I love being there. I love skiing, whether it's water skiing or snow skiing. I love traveling, meeting different people from different parts of the world, learning different cultures. I've always said, had I not become a lawyer, and also had I not had a family, I would have traveled my entire life and I would have stayed places 6 months at a time
Mm.
and just immersed myself within the
Yeah.
culture and learn their language and how they think and reason and react and interact with each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
I've always thought, and there was a time period, I started college as dance drama, switched to psychology, then
Uh-huh.
public relations, and then went to law school. But there was a time when I was doing psychology that I just really appreciated psychology, sociology, and philosophy. And I think I've never lost that.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think learning new things, kind of to sum that up, would be being in nature, doing something physical, learning new things, appreciating the things around me. And then since I do have a family, it's truly being with them.
Yeah.
I think we're at our best. And my husband and I talk about this because we're busy. We're so
Yeah.
busy. They each
Yeah.
have their thing that keeps them very busy, and they're, great students. My husband's job and my job. But when we travel together and we're someplace new and we're learning together, and
Yeah.
usually when we're out doing things, that brings me probably the most joy.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. What makes you angry, and what is it like when you're angry for you as well as for those around you?
It really depends. Injustice, we talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Justice really angers me,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to seek justice.
Mm.
Not vengeance, not let me get back at somebody, but let me make this right. How can we make this right?
Mm-hmm.
With my children, my spouse, and my friends,
Mm-hmm.
I would say dishonesty, inauthenticity, and disloyalty would be the three things that I had to stop and think, because when I talk about important traits in a friendship, I say loyalty and authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, those are the two highest,
Mm-hmm.
loyalty and authenticity. And in a parent-child relationship, I say honesty and respect.
Mm.
And those are the most important to me. So then, the kids will make decisions or choices, and then actions.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, we can pretty much work through and talk through anything, but you cannot lie and you cannot be disrespectful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was trying to think of the times that I've been most angry. And I would say, if I feel like there's an injustice, or I feel like there's a lack of loyalty. Sorry, Siri's going to talk to us again. But really the honesty and which is integrity as well.
Right. Yeah.
And the respect is really
Yeah.
important. They talk a lot about, and I can't remember where it comes from, that they say women want love, men want respect.
Mm.
I mean, I think I've always said, I know my kids love me. I don't need them to like me, but they do need to respect me.
Mm-hmm.
People say that's a very male-dominated trait. And I say, maybe so. I don't know. But I would say a lack of respect, I have no tolerance for.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a very 8 answer. Okay. What scares you? I mean, you mentioned vulnerability. Is there anything else that scares you?
It's funny, when my husband and I first started dating, we were in different states. And so we would have a lot of these great conversations. And I would say, what's your biggest fear? And when he asked me that, it took me about 2 seconds, because I think it's always been the same thing. I think my biggest fear is to really want something wholly or deeply, to succeed at something completely, and then to fail. And I have a feeling you're going to say that's a 3 answer.
No, I think that's a vulnerability answer.
Is it?
Yeah, for an 8. So yeah, it would be a 3 answer for a 3. But I guess my question to you is, why would you feel that way? Why would failure be upsetting to you?
I think it goes to the beginning part. Because I do a lot of things well, but if there's something that I want to either be the best at, and when I say the best, I don't mean compared to somebody else.
Right.
I mean my best.
Your best, yeah.
Right. And we have that conversation with our kids a lot, because our son wants to be the best football player in the world.
Yeah.
That's great, but there will always be somebody that's better, right?
Yep.
But I think I hadn't identified it as a vulnerability until you just said that, but I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's putting myself out there and
Mm.
being willing to dedicate, to sacrifice
Yeah.
my time and my energy and my intentions and my heart to care enough to want to succeed,
Right.
and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
for it to
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, because all 9 types, no one wants to fail at anything,
Right.
right? But you're going to have 9 different reasons why failure feels uncomfortable. And I think the 8 answer would be, that it would make them feel vulnerable.
Yeah.
That would be my guess. So sounds like it resonates.
Yeah. See, I just had an epiphany. Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay. All right. Some of these we already covered. And I apologize for my little 4-legged friend here, but
That's okay.
she just stirred up. All right. So we talked about your 7-wing. We kind of talked about your 5-wing. Is there anything that you could add to the experience around the 5-wing, not 5-wing, the 5-line, and how you experience that in stress? I mean, it sounds like you really work toward the high side of it, but I guess maybe a good question is, has it ever been a problem for you?
I think it can be relationally because if there is stress,
Yeah.
instead of tapping into how I feel about that
Yeah.
in a relationship, be it
Yeah.
friendship or a romantic relationship,
Mhm.
I tend to get very logical and analytical,
Yeah.
which
Mhm.
isn't the best thing for a relationship.
Mhm. Mhm.
It may be great for winning an argument, but then, it's the question, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? And so I might be right. I might win the argument, but is it really
Yeah.
bringing us closer? And are we
Right.
really working on conflict resolution together? Or is it more
Yeah.
about talking past each other?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that's where I have to be very intentional about not doing that. And I'm not great at
Yeah.
it. I'm not great at it.
It's a
'Cause
hard
I get
thing.
very logical.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, all right. Um, did your life change when you learned you were an 8? And would you say it was, or just more
Mm,
clarity?
I would say more clarity.
Mhm.
But it wasn't, so it didn't surprise me when I heard about the 9 types, and only 5 years ago, so
Mhm.
an eighth of my life.
Mhm.
But where it really resonated, where it really did the work with me or helped me understand was how that can be a positive thing.
Mhm.
Because, I looked at it like I'm very justice oriented. I'm very from a headspace, and people would say, oh, you have very male dominated traits.
Mhm.
And I would say, okay, I'm also in a somewhat male dominated field,
Field, yeah. Yeah.
but I didn't really think about it.
Mhm.
But I think it gave me some clarity in why and how I feel and act the way I do.
Mhm.
But where I think it really did the best work was understanding that at my best, I'm a giver, which makes perfect sense.
Mhm.
I mean, I could tell
Yeah.
you stories and stories of, elaborate gifts I've given at different points in my life where I was doing different things. And that brings me joy. I
Yeah.
loved
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah.
And then the flip side is where relationships have broken down because I went to that very logical instead of that emotional or understanding space that I should have been in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think it gave me um, it it made it a positive thing that I'm an 8 and
Yeah.
helped me
Yeah.
understand it.
Mhm.
Put
Yeah.
a name to
Right.
where I already was,
Right.
and then helped with the lines of at my best and at my worst.
Mhm.
And then I think where it also helped is reading about having my husband take it, my
Mhm.
partner, and reading about his,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then understanding how we can really be good together and how sometimes we're not. And then what do we
Right.
do with that?
What do about it, right? Exactly. Exactly. Okay. What's the best thing about being an 8 for you?
Being able to change the world.
And is it also having the capacity and the energy to do it?
Probably, yeah. But I've always had that energy. Friends
Uh-huh.
of mine in
Yeah.
college would say, they would say, "You're not high maintenance, you're high energy." I mean, my entire life I've heard that. And I think that's true. But
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
I think, yeah, and it's feeling like I don't feel like there's anything I can't do. No, I'm not going to go join, you know, the WNBA tomorrow. I'm 5'3". But so I fully recognize my limitations. But beyond those very, basic limitations, I feel like there's
Uh-huh.
nothing I can't do. There's nothing I
Yeah,
can't accomplish. There's nothing
yeah,
I can't help somebody else accomplish.
yeah.
And that brings
Yep,
me joy too, feeling
yep,
like I truly can make a difference in the world
yeah,
and
yeah,
leave a legacy, not just with my kids, but maybe with some work I've done or people's
yeah,
lives I've changed.
yeah, yeah,
That brings me joy.
yeah. Awesome. What's the hardest thing about leading with 8?
Um, Gosh, with leading with 8, probably I'm thinking of 2 different things and so I'll just name both of them.
Uh-huh,
Probably relationally,
uh-huh.
because we are more outspoken, more
Yeah.
direct.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just, but I think that's where my 7 wing helps
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because, the enthusiast part, like, yeah, this might really suck, but that's okay. We're going to fix it. So
Yep.
I love
Yep.
leading with that. I love leading. When I say leading, I mean leading groups, leading,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
whatever it is I'm
Mm-hmm.
taking on. But I think the challenge is with that energy and that willingness and desire and competency for the most part to be able to make those changes,
Mm-hmm.
but then not being too um, intense, I guess is the word I think you use that
Mm-hmm.
I like,
Mm-hmm.
because then you're not really helping if people just shut down because it's
Yeah.
too much,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But then the other part of it would be, so that's more in a professional
Uh-huh.
context.
Yeah.
But I would say in a personal context, it would be taking the time and giving yourself that space. I say space for grace, but space
Mm-hmm.
for permission
Mm-hmm.
to not be perfect,
Yeah.
permission to not do everything right um, or immediate, and letting yourself be vulnerable because there is
Mm-hmm.
power in that. But
Mm-hmm.
that's a
Yeah.
growth place.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're letting go. Yeah. What is a non-negotiable for you? Or another way I ask this is, what is bedrock for you, or what do you absolutely know in your gut to be true as an 8? What's the one thing that no one's ever going to change your mind about?
Hmm. That is such a good question. I guess I would say that we, and this goes back to honestly to the Christian basis of this, that at the end of the day, God said, love me and love each other.
Mm-hmm.
That for me, it's not negotiable that me loving others means that I am an advocate for them
Mm-hmm.
and I stand up for them for what's right.
Mm-hmm.
And I live my life with the intention of making the world better. And so everything I do needs to be done through that lens of bettering the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that means, that sounds like this great, grand, noble idea, but it starts right here with this one board I'm on, or this one group that I interact with, or the people right here in my own house.
Yeah.
But that's a non-negotiable, that I need to feel like I'm impactful
Mm-hmm.
and doing something significant
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that makes things better or more beautiful or more just or more right, or no, I mean, everything is so fluid that if you always have that lens of this is my purpose,
Mm-hmm.
that's my purpose. So
Mm-hmm.
the lens of this is my purpose is how I kind of view what I do and the relationships that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say feeling like I do something that matters, that makes things better.
Yeah. Nice.
I don't know if that's an 8 or not, or if that's just.
I hear the 8 and I hear the 7. I hear it's almost like a glowing light of the 7 over on the 8. That's kind of how I'm hearing it. And the two line as well. So I mentioned before that the 9 types are said to be the 9 faces of God. And we hold one of those reflections at the core of our being. It's kind of a non-negotiable energy. The thing that we know without ever being taught. We just know it. So what can you share with the people listening about the face of God that vibrates through the energy of type 8, your experience of the divine, the 8 piece of the divine face?
And I don't know what it says in the book, but I can tell you, interestingly, I was at a like a wellness seminar about a year ago, and everybody threw a series of questions, pared down what 2 things matter most to them. And it started with what matters to the people that you love, the people that you care about, what you would want to see in them, how you would want to, if you could make everything in their life a certain way. And it came down to 2 things. And that was really insightful for me because I hadn't done that exercise before. And most people had health and happiness. Mine were purpose and joy. And I don't know what that core, when you talk about the 9 God types, I don't know what the 8 is. But for me, it would be purpose, living with a purpose, and joy, which means having joy in my life and then giving joy to others. And so I say every day, God, talk to me and through me. Talk to me and through me. And so I don't know, is that consistent with what?
I hear purpose is the 8 energy.
Okay.
Yeah, and the 7 is the joy to me. And some of the 2, the 2 line, obviously there's heart energy there, but I think of the 7, I think of joyfulness. So yeah, I would say 8 wing 7 is what I hear there. So yeah.
But then I think, and not in a bad way, when I think about 5, and I've only heard it as investigator. I don't know what the actual.
Yep. Observer, researcher, investigator, any of those. Yep.
I think the way in which I do a lot of that is through that. I channel that. Okay, so this needs to be done. It's great to want to live with a purpose. It's great to have joy, but how do you actually accomplish that? And I think that's when I'm able to tap into that and say, all right, so we're gonna have a plan. We're gonna make a list. We're gonna go through and check it off. We're gonna execute it. We're gonna have a purpose statement, goals.
Yeah. So what I really hear in you is the embodiment of what I feel is the embodiment of the Enneagram, that it is a dance. It's said to be all the 9 points. I don't know if you know this, said to be the Sufi dance, the steps of the Sufi dance. Yeah. So to me, when I started learning the Enneagram, I got some pushback from friends who are like, I don't need a label. Don't label me. I don't want to talk about it. I'm not a label. And I'm like, it's not a label. It's a breath. It's moving. There's a dance. You don't have to just be your label. It just brings you awareness to, if I tip this way, I have access to that energy. If I move that way, I have access to the, it's this constant, in Chinese medicine, I would say it's also a Tai Chi. So it informs us, it broadens our awareness so that we can move through the different facets of the Enneagram and not just be stuck in our 8 corner or our 5 corner or whatever. We have information that informs our natural inclinations. And I think you portrayed that brilliantly.
I think it's interesting when you say that about the different types and that perception, because it's almost as if they're afraid, or people might be afraid that you're going to attach judgment based on labeling that.
Yeah.
But for me, my experience has been, by knowing it, it hasn't labeled me as much as it's given me insight.
Yeah.
And information. And then it's made me want to explore more. And learn why, shouldn't we always be asking why? Why are we making this decision? Why are we acting the way? Why are we living the way we're living? And so for me, it's been just an entire portal of education.
Yeah, same for me. When I studied at first, I studied at a monastery. I studied the Enneagram there. And they would say the Enneagram doesn't put you in a box, it frees you from the box that we've all been living in until we, kind of become aware of things. So yeah, so I'm glad you see it that way too. So Melissa, it has been my supreme honor and joy to spend this time with you, and I'm so grateful that you were willing to be on my podcast here.
For having me. And thank you
Yes.
for all of the really good questions. You've given me a lot to think
Okay.
about.
Good,
Now I
good.
want to go reread my book and reinvestigate what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, and how I'm feeling.
Okay, well, I'm glad. I'm glad. And thank you again. And I'll have all this information in the show notes for everybody. But again, Melissa Rueschhoff from the Holon Law Partners, LLP, and I'll have your website in there for everybody to take a look at later on. Thank you again, Melissa. I so appreciate your time and your generosity. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All
As we
right.
say in Hawaii, aloha.
Aloha. Okay.